Welcome back everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make this little rack. I'll be using mine for vegetables, but you can store pretty much anything you want in them. Here's a layout of all the pieces we're going to make. For this build, all you'll need is two 2x3s, a quarter sheet of 1/2 inch plywood, and a very small amount of 1/4 inch plywood. I'm going to start with the boxes. I do appreciate it if you stay and watch the entire video, but if you want to just watch how to make the rack, go ahead and skip to this time. All you need to know is that the boxes are going to be 10 inches wide, 13 inches long, and 7 inches tall. Here's the 1/2 inch plywood. I'm going to start by making a layout of the boxes on this sheet. I'll make a mark at 10, 23, 33, and 43 inches. Along the other edge, I'll make a mark every 7 inches, but stopping at 22 inches so that I have an extra inch to account for blade kerf later on. This T-square has seen better days. This is just to visualize the parts though, and to make sure I have enough room for everything. I'm going to mark the parts so that the grain lines up when I glue it later. That's why I alternated the lengths earlier. I'll cut along the 22 line. This piece will be 48 by 22. I'm going to run this through the table saw, so I'll clean up the edge a little bit first so that it doesn't snag on the fence. I've had to redo a lot of parts because of little pieces that remain on the edges. I'll cut both edges to ensure they're parallel. Now that my material is prepped, I can start cutting my pieces. With the fence set at 7 inches, I'll cut 3 strips. Over on the miter saw, I'll cut the pieces to length, but leaving them slightly long. A 1/2 inch on each piece should be good. I forgot to do that on one piece, so my boxes are going to be 10 by 12 and 15/16. With the fence set at 13 inches, I cut 45s into all my long pieces. I did the same with the 10 inch pieces with the fence at 10. For the bottoms of the box, I set the fence so that I leave a little more than 1/8 for the bottom piece to sit in. You have to do this to all your pieces before moving the fence, otherwise they won't line up. Then nudge your fence slightly and repeat until you get close to the thickness of your bottom piece. In my case, the bottom will be a 1/4 inch thick, so 2 passes should do it. I'll nudge the fence slightly and repeatedly check to see if the bottom piece fits yet. I'm transferring the marks I made earlier to the channel I cut since I'm going to lose them when I sand. Here's what the dots represent. To get the measurements of the bottoms, I'll measure the channel and cut rectangles just shy of the longest point on each side. I forgot to record cutting those pieces, but they're just rectangles. After checking that everything fits as intended, I'll sand using 120 and 180 grit. This plywood came sanded, so I skipped 80. I'm going to go ahead and do the stain before the glue. I hate staining boxes after the fact because the corners are hard to get into and it just takes too long. I try to avoid glue surfaces during this, but no worries if you get some stain on those edges. They should still be plenty strong. Since this is cheap plywood, I'm going to be using pre-stain to help with blotching. This is the early American color from Varathane. One last fit check before glue. I would hate to spend the extra time to line up the grain just to glue it in the wrong order. Carefully flipping it over, I can start applying glue. You don't really need clamps for this, the tape should be enough. With the boxes done, I can start on the stand. I'm going to mark and cut 2 pieces of the 2x3s at 36 inches. The cross sections of the back and the arms are the same, so I'll cut 9 pieces at 10 inches. These were the nicest pieces I could find at Home Depot, but the sides are still pretty rough, so I'm going to clean them up a little on the table saw. I made this handy little print to help me consistently mark where the boxes should sit. Link to it down below. This has a lip on both sides so that I can slide it on and hold it against the edges. I'll mark 6 of the 10 inch pieces. I'm also looking for the best orientation. If you don't have a 3D printer or don't want to use a jig, here's the dimensions of the cut I'm going to make. I also made this piece. It's a little bit smaller and it only has a lip on one side. This will be used for the longer pieces. I'll mark those pieces at 6 1/4, 19 1/4, and 32 1/4. The lines I made are where the corner of the cut is going to be. I'll just line up the corner with the line and mark it. With a 2x4 behind my pieces and the miter saw set at 30 degrees, I'll make these cuts. Honestly, I prefer making these kind of cuts on the table saw, so I'll make all the cuts on the little pieces here. I find it more accurate, but I don't want to fumble around with the longer pieces. I accidentally cut all 9 of my 10-inch pieces. Luckily I had some wood left over. Okay, it's time to make a jig. If you have a bandsaw or some other way to make the steep cuts, you can skip this. For everyone else, here's how we're going to do it. I'll get a measurement from my jigsaw from the edge of its base plate. The length of this measurement doesn't really matter as long as it's past the blade. I'll drill a pilot hole on the sides of one of the strips and I'll attach it to the other piece. Using that as my guide, I'll cut the edge off the board. This will make sort of like a zero clearance jigsaw guide. With the jig lined up, I'll clamp one of the 10-inch pieces to the jig. You can also attach another piece here for the alignment of the other side. With the material clamped, I can make these cuts on all the pieces. It's not perfect, but good enough. The longer pieces are more awkward, but the same procedure, except I clamp the material to the workbench too. I'll sand here and soften the edge a little bit. This is optional, but I'm going to add a chamfer to the ends of the arms and the tops of the backs. The saw is set at 45, and using a piece of scrap, I set a stop block at the length I thought looked nice. It's almost time for the assembly. I'll examine my pieces and lay them out so that the nicer part of each piece is facing out, since this is the part people will actually see. I'm going to use pocket holes for this. Since I only have the single pocket hole jig, I'll make some marks to line up the jig so that they look consistent. I'm going to attach the back with regular deck screws, but I'll mark them too for consistency. Assembly time finally, and honestly this is the hardest part, but once you get the first piece on, the rest is a breeze. I'm working on top of a piece of MDF because it's flatter than my workbench. Trying to figure out the best way to clamp this is tricky because you want the bottom to sit flush, but without something flat to put on the end of it, I'll have to do this with the structure standing up. These are some 2x4s that I cut at 10.5 inches. Using those as guides, I'll install the other pieces. I applied a little bit of glue for extra strength and I'll drive the screws. You could do this using only glue, but then you have to wait for each pair of arms to set before moving them, and no one has time for that. Using those same 2x4s, I'll set them on top of the bottom arms, and this is how I'll line up the rest of them. A little more sanding to soften the transition between pieces. Gonna add a small round over here. I'm gonna stain this using a different color than the boxes. This color is called cognac, and it's a gel stain. A couple coats of lacquer to finish off this build. Lacquer is my favorite finish and is really easy to apply. The fumes are a bit strong though, so wear a respirator. And that's it. Here's all the parts. All that's left is to fill them up. Here's the breakdown of the prices in my area. If you don't have any material and have to buy full sheets of everything, you'll have to spend around $80. But since you don't actually use the entire sheets, the price of the material is about $21 plus tax. Not too bad. I had fun building this and I hope you enjoyed watching. I encourage you to follow along and build your own. Thanks for watching.